Well, praise the Lord. Look, God is so good, isn't He? And look, we've just had an amazing time, and I just thank the Lord for it. And for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast on the Gold Coast, one of the things that really resonated with me was Albert Vexler, who basically does a lot of the organising for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. It was a blessing that we had members of the Knesset there, MPs from some of the Pacific nations, and many from around Australia, many ministries and lovers of Israel there. But what Albert said, he talked about there are windows of opportunities, windows that open at a special time, and they can be lost if you don't act when that window of opportunity opens. And he mentioned a country in South America where the president had said, if I get elected in, I will recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he was prayed for by the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, elected in, and he didn't do it. And we know that Australia's at a critical moment at this time when the ALP National Conference in Brisbane soon may well recognise Palestine unilaterally without a peace agreement. And so that's one thing that really concerns us, because we really want Australia to be a sheep nation, not a goat nation, as it talks about in Matthew. And Albert he really had a heartfelt moment where he said, Australia, you missed your opportunity. And I believe what he was talking about there was when the Australian government, the previous government under Scott Morrison, wanted to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the embassy there from Tel Aviv. And we know that there were complaints from Malaysia and Indonesia about that, and he pulled back somewhat on that and said he would move it to West Jerusalem, but that didn't happen. And now, since we've got a new government in, we've even pulled back from that. And so Albert was saying, Australia, you have a second chance. And so it's so important that we don't miss that second chance, because then it could be lost forever. And we know that when the nations are judged, we want to be judged as a sheep nation, one that loves Israel, not as a goat nation that God has judgment against. And so that was a very important moment, I think. And also reflecting on the time we spent at the Gold Coast, Cairns and Townsville, with the ambassador and Christian leaders pro-Israel, and Norman had an opportunity to share as founder of the Indigenous Friends of Israel, and I had a brief opportunity as well. I think three things stood out to me. The important thing was the connection with the Israeli ambassador to Australia and Rabbi Reisenberg and other Christian national leaders who are pro-Israel, and people generally, Christians who are pro-Israel. So number one, the connection, I believe, was very important. Number two, I believe the educational value was very important too. And thirdly, the inspirational value of those Christians who love Israel, who may feel isolated in mainstream churches and don't realise that there are really so many Christians in our nation who love Israel. The ambassador, Amir Maimon, was very warm and very honest and shared things close to his heart. And in Townsville, when I shared about the handbook on the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, with a focus on the Australian Indigenous response by William Cooper and others, when I just shared briefly on that in Townsville and mentioned that I had been asked to do that by Eli Rabinovich of We Are Here Foundation in Perth. The ambassador is obviously someone who's able to wing it. And he got up and he picked on a couple of things that people had said. And he picked up on Lithuania because that's the connection he had with Eli. And he told us a very moving time of when he was ambassador there, because 95% of the Jewish people in Lithuania had been murdered in the Holocaust, and he spoke very movingly about his reaction to that. And so I won't share something that he said, but he said he'd learned, even though it was very difficult, he'd learned to embrace people rather than reacting negatively. And interestingly, although that handbook, I finished it last year, Eli's recently said to me, look, I'd like you to add at least a page or so on Lithuania. So I thought that was interesting that he focused so much on that. But I will leave it at that. There's so much more I could say, but it was such a blessing and wonderful to have our family in Cairns come along for the event in Cairns as well. So praise the Lord. Thank you so much.